Tuesday at 12:30, and I'm so excited to welcome you all back to this week's edition of the Mindset Michelle TV show. I hope wherever you are in the world that it's another beautiful day and that your world and your life is going fabulously for you. This week I have the extra special guest, and I feel like I'm in the presence of a true master. I have the fabulous Paul Mracek. How do you say your last name, Paul? I've been practicing. Mracek. Paul Mracek on the show today. So for those of you that aren't aware of Paul, he is a master at NLP, he's a master at martial arts, he's a master at mindset, he's a master in so many different areas and so many different things. And he has his own organisation that helps people with all of those different areas, that is based on a bit of this and a bit of that, from the martial arts, from business to life, from everything from mindfulness to the Kotan to hypnosis. There are so many different skills and expertise today, and I just feel so honoured and so pleasured to have you on the show today, Paul.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here, and it's an honour to be here. And I have to say thank you to Autel for putting us two together for it. And welcome to everyone to the show. And hopefully, yes, we have a great day today as well.
Fabulous. Yes, and a special call out to Autel, the wonderful woman who connected the two of us. And we both seem to have this really interesting, different way of coming to mindset and mindfulness and what it takes to change and create a successful mindset. But before we dive into that, Paul, do you want to explain to people a little bit more about your background?
Yes, well, I'm an engineer by profession, so that's how I started the world, with looking at everything logically and practically as part of the process. Being an engineer for now going on over 30 years, and in that process I've worked for a lot of multinationals like Bosch, the German company, Honeywell, the US based company, electric motor businesses for those, mainly in automotive, and then moved into the white goods area. And I've been looking after businesses in, let me see now, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Taiwan, India, China, and then I was a global engineering chief for electric motors in North America, Europe, South America. So I've had a bit of a chance to move around, and I was looking after, 2,000 to 3,000 people across 4 countries with a profit and loss responsibility for it. So from a very practical point of view of what works, what doesn't work, across various cultures, I got that exposure to be able to see, what makes people tick and how they tick, in terms of being able to get things done, and also working through the bureaucracy in different countries. That's always a challenge in terms of what you see things being done differently in different countries to it. But as part of that, of course, you get burnt out. You get a lot of pressure on you for those things. A normal day would finish at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then your question is, how do you actually get to recharge yourself and sleep properly as part of that process? And in terms of that, so I sort of moved into the martial arts area as part of that process. I was looking to doing things which made it easier for me to be able to do that. I learned to touch, type, speed, read, and do all the other things that people do to try and be more productive about what you do. And at the same time, when I was having some kids, we had, a few learning issues that we were looking to do. And through them going to things like Jimbaroo and looking at, different skill sets and how to switch the brain on better, the left and right hemispheres, I got into the martial arts initially, and then into NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, about, how people learn and how children learn. And then, of course, how children learn is how adults learn as part of that process. So I went through that process and started to do the neuroscience aspect of it, but also the practical side, because you need to be able to release that tension and the stress that you get from working long hours and traveling all the time associated with it. It's better to hit a bag than hit a person, because then you don't get charged and you don't have a problem as part of the issue. So I got into that and did that, and that's been 28 years now since I've been doing martial arts. And then, as you said, I got into meditation, into and the traditional Chinese medicine, how that works, and I became a Bowen therapist, which is an Australian system by a guy called Tom Bowen. And then into the coaching, counselling, those different types of aspects for it. So that was part of that journey that you're learning. And then how do you apply it to dealing with other people? How do you make sure that you can, you can turn off and recharge your batteries, so to speak, associated with it? And I found, for example, like meditation, if I could do 20 minutes of meditation, get the equivalent to 3 to 4 hours sleep, which was a great way of being able to make sure that you're always recharging yourself. I mean, one of the little sayings that I've seen is that I quite like, and that is, time is fixed, energy flexes. So it's about how you flex your energy, in terms of whether your physical energy and your mental energy to be able to cope with the things that you're doing around you. You have a fixed amount of time you have to know that you have to do. You can't save it. You can't go to the bank and get it back out again. But your energy, you can charge your energy up in different ways, in different processes, mindfulness, meditation, those types of things. And I found that was very useful as part of that process. So I started up my own business after I'd been in corporate for probably 25 years or so. And then the last 14 years, I've been doing my own business in terms of doing consulting work in various companies. And the biggest problem I always find when I go into an organization is not the technical issue, because I can cope with those pretty easily. It's more the fact that the relationship that you find at the executive senior management group and how they manage themselves between themselves and with their subordinates is really where the key issues lie. And as soon as you solve some of those problems, which generally are outside of business, strangely enough, they're usually outside of business is where the issues are. Once you start to sort those things out, then what happens is the culture starts to change within the organization and people get on board and you get an alignment in terms of objectives. And people start to work well together and the business starts to flourish. And that's usually what I see as part of those issues. And that's what I've been doing. So I still run martial arts. I still teach, 3-4 times a week. And then I do my consulting business as part of it as well. And you get the two practical sides together for it.
Wow. And as I said at the start, so many and a real master, at martial arts and all of those different areas. And I can really hear that common thread about understanding people, understanding behaviours and motivations, like you're explaining about your current day with the C-suite and the people that you work with there. That most of the issues actually from outside and from other areas in people's lives. That's what we've found with most of our clients as well, that unless you address those underlying issues, it doesn't matter what IT system you're trying to implement or what processes or culture you're trying to implement. People are human beings. And I loved how you were describing when you were working and flying and living in many different countries, because I really think that those types of experiences of experiencing that we're all fundamentally, whatever the culture, we have the same kind of drives and desires in life. And Absolutely. We then also have the same kind of issues and blockages, which I'm so excited to be talking to you today some more about that energy, because working with the energy, whether it's like the different methods you've mentioned, whether it's mindfulness or meditation or whatever, that is some of the key to managing your energy. And that other great point you've raised around the time being fixed, but your energy being the variable.
Yeah, it's very much the case that you find that is what you need to be able to develop a proficiency at, is in regards to that. I mean, we talk about mind and body, but what everyone forgets is that the two things that hold that together is energy. So that's the cement that holds both things together. So if you're physically tired, you can still be mentally alert. But if you're mentally tired, your body seems to be physically tired as well at the same time. So the consumption of energy by the brain is a very high percentage in comparison to the rest of the body. So you need to know how to manage that and how to deal with that as part of that process. And then, of course, giving off that energy towards others and making others around you feel confident and that they can achieve the outcomes that they're looking for as part of that process that we go through for it. So, that's all part of it. I mean, an interesting story was that I remember in India, I got a sales vice president who was interested in, he wanted to have a morning breakfast session at about 7 o'clock in the morning, which is not unusual because, he wanted to have a chat. And I was on the board for this particular executive director on the board for this company, which is about 2,000 people. And, 15 minutes after meeting, how are you, the normal things, he said to me, I'm feeling depressed and I feel suicidal and I don't know what to do. And you have this grown up person who's in front of you and they're talking to you and saying, I don't know what to do with my life. Everything's falling apart. I mean, this has got really nothing to do with what's happening in the situation from a work environment, you can see straight away this is external to the issues. And I just actually done some I think I just been through my master for the hypnotherapy style activities and that I was doing. And I just said to him, you know, a simple definition for depression is unresolved sadness. So what in your life that you feel sad about, you have no control over? And he just looked at me and burst into tears and said, my marriage is breaking down and I'm losing my family and my connection to my son. Because his role and position where he was in one city and his family was in another city. He had this extended period away and he felt like his connection to what meant life for him was being disconnected. He didn't know what to do about it as part of that process. So you know, it was an easy process in the end, because once you identify what the problem is, and you get some distance between the problem and yourself, you can see solutions. So the solution was, you know, talk to the managing director, see, because he's a sales guy, he doesn't have to be in the office. Can we revise and get him to do a lot of his work from the other city for a period of time, and let things settle down and work with him and see what we did. And that's what we did in terms of the process. Now, in this case, you know, he was happier, but he's decided that where he wanted to go with his life was different. So therefore, you know, there was an agreement as to getting someone else in the role, and he was actively participating in regards to the process of change, and it worked out really well. They increased their sales at a later stage once the new person came in, because they had a different person who was focusing differently for it. So they're the important things that you learn from it. You know, give yourself distance to any problem, and then you can see the alternatives as part of that issue. We generally have too many problems that we have straight up in our face, and we can't see around and see what's going on as part of that process.
Now, that's so true, that you know, not being able to be aware of what's going on because it's too close and too real for you. With all of this amazing and interesting background and so many, I'm sure we could spend hours with these fabulous stories of the work and the profound impact that that you do and it has on people. What then, you know, from an engineer to martial arts to working with people and supporting them through some quite difficult conversations like you've explained, what would you then suggest that is success to you? What defines success to you today now?
Yeah, we've had this conversation a little bit before for people to know. I mean, I always see there's two aspects. There's a definition and the meaning. You know, there's a definition of success, which is really accomplishment of an aim or a purpose. But then there's a meaning of what success is, and the meaning comes back to each person individually. And I think my first question when people talk about success, I always say, what area of your life are you talking about? And people go, what do you mean? So, well, you know, your life is not just work, or your life is not just family. Your life has 6 areas, which is the career, the family, relationships, personal growth, health and fitness, and spiritually. So depending on what area you're talking about, then your definition of success is going to be different. So as soon as you define what area you're talking about, so if you're talking about work, is it money, is it career, is it progression, or is if it's family, then, you know, is it to have financial freedom in terms of what you want to do, own your own house, whatever it may be. Spirituality could be completely different in terms of what you define as success. So I think rather than using the one lens or 2 lenses, which generally tends to be family and work, look at the lens that you really are looking for to define what success is. And as soon as you define what area you're looking at, the actual way of defining what success is going to be is easier. And then of course, the other issue then is what I normally find is that most people don't have boundaries about what they do. The moving goalpost type thing, you know, it'll be successful when I do this. Oh yeah, but now that I'm there, it'll be successful when I do this. So they need to make sure that they create the standards or the boundaries that they need, and then make sure they stick to that and measure that. And then if you need to, then create a new one after you succeeded for that and celebrated those things. That way you feel as though you're achieving an outcome as you go through part of that process. So really it's, you know, everyone's going to be different, but what area of life are you looking at in terms of those things? They're going to be similar, but they're not the same. And then define your level based upon that, and then have clear pathways in terms of what you want to do for it. You know, with 14 years worth of consulting going around everyone, and as you just said before, everyone is really the same. It doesn't matter where you came from. And effectively, you know, we're all human beings and we're all emotional. So what we feel, we think, and we become. So therefore, you know, we're all have different external pressures on us, but we all have similar needs and purposes. And the things that I found that people struggle with, and it's not a big long list as you think about it, is that they have 4 basic things that people need to.
Before we kind of go on, because this is all really interesting and fabulous information, but I'm sure people watching are really interested with so much knowledge and so much insights. What do you then define as success for yourself?
Success to me comes back to the simple issue of about peace, love, and happiness, which I know is a bit silly, which is a bit old-fashioned. You know, I want to have peace. I want to have peace, love, and happiness, but the definition of that is a little bit different depending upon what area I'm looking at. So it can be peace, can be security. If you have a look at the people that are in Afghanistan at the moment, you'd like to know that, you know, what they're looking for is so that they don't get shot. So it's really about having security in what I do, or having the ability to be safe. Being happy could be things like being valued in what I'm doing. It could be being people realize that you're providing an input to other things, so being recognized for those issues. And I think happiness is a universal thing. You should be happy no matter what you're doing as part of that process in terms of those issues, and understanding that the only person who decides whether you're going to be happy is you. It's not dependent upon other people external to you, and understand that happiness is about how you see things and how you take those things on board in terms of for yourself in your life and what area that you're looking at.
And I think that that's a really important point that you make around the internal definition as opposed to an external definition of what success is. And I think you've described it really well there about it's about what you define your internal success to be. And I like how you have split it up into those different 6 areas, so that when people are thinking, oh, what does success mean to me, they can start with maybe one of those areas and then understand that it can be quite multifaceted, like we've been discussing. Correct. So somebody like yourself, when you say, well, what is success, it can have quite a depth of meaning. And for other people that I've spoken with, you know, it's quite straightforward. It's work-life balance, or time with the family, or money, or whatever it might be. But it's still driven by those different 6 areas. And if they drill down into those areas, then they have other elements and other components that make that foundation of success for them.
Yeah, and then it's a bit like the martial arts. We talk about principles and techniques. So in martial arts, you have base principles, and the base principles apply no matter what style, what matter technique, no matter what circumstances that you're in. And I think success is a very similar thing to that, in that if you have the base principles that you understand, peace, love, and happiness, that they apply, and then you then say, okay, circumstances change. You know, your life is different every day. You know that something changes every day. Circumstances change. And therefore, how do you cope with those circumstances, how they change, and how do you be resilient and adaptable to that, and how you look at it? But the principles still apply that allows you to be successful in terms of what you want to do and keep focus on those issues as you go through. And the point that you bring up with, you know, I always say there's 2 types of people in the world. One are the ones that judge themselves and what they achieve and do from internally, from themselves, so it originates from inside themselves, and the other ones who always need someone to tell them that they are doing a good job, which is seeing themselves through other people's eyes. And, you know, the most important person to you is you, so the most important person to them is them. So they're always going to tell you from their perspective what makes them feel good about what they think about you. So, you know, it's going to be with a different filter compared to what those issues are. So it's better for you to always judge what you're doing, take people's input, but always judge and have the value of yourself based on how you, to your own values and beliefs, and internally about how you do that and how you respond to those around you.
And I think that's even more important when you start to talk about success. You know, what does that success mean internally to you, as opposed to what maybe the world or the neighbours or the this or the that, what those different exterior elements say. I know that we can keep talking and talking, but part of the show and what I'd love you to share with people is, what would be some tips that you would say, with all your incredible wealth of experience, how can people create their own success mindset? What tips would you give to help people?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's two basic things that I found has really been quite helpful for people, and in terms of how they can do that. And I call them those two challenges. One I call the self-mastery challenge, and the other one is the self-management challenge. So the self-mastery challenge is what you would think about. It's about yourself and trying to have mastery on about you and who you are about those issues. And we tend to have, what we touched on there is that we have people where when we've grown up, our values and beliefs are given to us and taken over from our parents, our uncles or grandparents, and these sorts of things. And at that stage, you just accept what they are. Now, the majority of people don't go back as they get older and say, oh, my value is this, so I should look at this and do it. They all sit in your blind spot. Your values, beliefs, and fears are all sitting in your blind spot, and you never really take them out and expose them and say, well, is this still true? Compared to when I was 5, now that I'm 55 or 25 or 35, these circumstances, are they still true? Because now I have more knowledge and experience compared to what I had.
The other thing that I think is really important there as well is that people don't necessarily realise they have that choice point. So they're still run by those old dynamics, beliefs, behaviours, actions, but they don't realise that when they're an adult, they're not that child anymore, and they actually have a choice point with making those decisions, doing things differently. They're kind of on I use the example of a train track. You know, an issue or something comes up and they kind of head off on this train track, and it's very hard for them to shift or to move from there. So I agree that, you know, those values and elements that people are given, it sit in their blind spots and they're not aware of them most of the time.
Yeah. And the interesting part, and there lies the challenge. The challenge is that these things become limiting decisions for you. And I think quite a few people have heard that expression previously. So you making decisions, but the decisions rather than moving you forward and adding value, that become limiting in what they do and how you perceive things and do things. So you create the fears about what's going to happen. You know, people get anxious and worry about the outcome of particular issues. So the first thing really to do is to realize that you're making a limiting decision, to identify that you're doing it, and then say, okay, what are the facts that's making me respond this way versus the perceived facts in terms of those issues. And generally, you'll find that things are blown out of proportion because there's an emotional element that's been attached to it because of some previous significant emotional event as part of it. So as soon as you start to bring it out and bring it into the light of day and bring up these natural assumptions in the way you respond and change it, then you're going to change from reacting to a situation to responding to a situation. I don't know whether your parents were like that, but my parents used to say, if you get angry, what's the first thing they tell you to do? Count to 10 and wait, right? So you don't react straight away. It's the same thing. What's the difference between react and respond? About 10 seconds. So you need to take a time to actually see what your perception is of those issues are versus what they actually are. And quite often you'll find that they're not what you think they are.
And so true that the clients that we work with, it's very similar. We talk about pausing and using that pausing to actually reflect and look at, well, you've had that feeling of, anger, frustration or whatever come up, but is it really you? Is it really what's happening in that situation, or is it a pattern or a habit that you've taken on from previously? And I really do think and agree with you that that self-mastery of becoming aware of these things, and then the self-management when you have these limiting beliefs, challenging them. And that's why we talk about choice points, because that awareness of what's going on is the first stage, and then the choice point of, okay, well, I can keep going with those values and beliefs, or I can do the work to actually shift it and to move it.
Yeah, it's basically a decision. How do you change your values? You can do that. How do you be happy? You just decide to be. So it's the same thing with limiting decisions. You can make a decision about whether you decide to do that or not do that about those issues. If you decide to continue with it, then okay, at least you made the decision, rather than reacting to a situation unconsciously about it, and getting a different outcome that you were expecting. So disconnecting those emotions is the first bit, and that helps clarify your things. It also breaks the procrastination cycle, because suddenly you now are doing the things that are related to the factual situation rather than you perceive things, so you don't get into this anxiety loop and you start to break that procrastination cycle, which leads you to the next point, which is the self-management challenge. And really the opposite to procrastination is action. So, and what most people don't have is they don't have a clear pathway. I sort of touched on it before about having purpose, direction, focus, and action, is that people don't have a proper plan about what they want to do on the specific area of that they're looking for from a success point of view. So once you establish that you've got a area that you want to do and you put the plan together, you then have to take action and be persistent about what you're actually doing. Sure, there's going to always be things that get thrown up to you. There's a nice word everyone likes to use at the moment, which is pivot, which drives me nuts. It's adaptability and resilience. But the idea for that is that, you know that there's going to be a consequence for all actions. So the consequence can either be good, bad, or indifferent. So plan around that accordingly and have those plans. So once you start to move forward with it, then that's the way that you can then see how you have control of the situation and you can achieve the outcomes in the simple and easiest way. The conversation I have regularly with people is that they like to be spontaneous and they say, I'm too structured and I'm too planned. And I say to them, because I'm structured and planned, I can be more spontaneous and enjoy it than you can. Because they're doing things spontaneous, but in the back of their mind, they're worrying about, I haven't done this yet, I haven't done that yet, when am I going to get a chance to do it? And they're not in the moment, they're head somewhere else. Whereas if you're planned and you know what you're doing, then you can afford to be spontaneous because you know you can afford to be as part of that.
And it all comes back to where we started beautifully around focus and energy. So having that focus and having the discipline, I've used that word a few times as well, where it's about the discipline to sit there and to make the action plan, do the action plan and go through it warts and all. But it's that discipline that you keep building and you keep building the habits and the patterns around.
There's a great book called Indistractable that's worth reading for anyone. It's a nice little easy book to read, but it talks about the way that we allow ourselves to be distracted with telephones and other things in life and how you can change that approach to what it is so that you can remain focused on what you want to do as part of that process to achieve what you want.
And it's fascinating, the stats that I've seen sometimes on social media about the hours people spend on social media is pretty amazing. So just quickly then, if people are wanting to get hold of you after today, then what's the best way that they can contact you?
The easiest way they can contact me is just go to my website at Coton Australia and just paul@cotonaustralia.com is the email. And there's some details about what I do there, and then people can contact me through there as part of that process for it. That's the quickest and simplest way to do it.
Fabulous. So just spelling that out, it's Kotan, Coton Australia. Just so people don't look up, see, it starts with a K.
It's a Japanese word that means elegant simplicity.
Oh, wonderful. And if people were wanting to know what the older and the more experienced Paul, what would the older and more experienced Paul say to the younger Paul? What advice would you give your younger self?
I think the easiest for that is make sure, it's an old cliche, but it certainly is, enjoy the journey, not just the destination. If you haven't got value from the destination, then you haven't taken the time to enjoy the journey. And I think that, what a lot of things is that when you're in your career, you're always looking to achieve to the next milestone, the next milestone, the next milestone to say, I've been successful in my career. It's really about enjoying what you've been doing as you go through. The old saying is that you can't, I haven't heard anyone on their deathbed saying, I wish I worked a bit more. So I think it's really about enjoying the people that you do and understanding that we're here to be with family, to have the love that I talked about, the happiness, and then have the security about what we want to do. I think making sure that I was aware of that when I was younger would have been very helpful.
Yeah, and it does seem to be more of that element that as you get older and you get more mature and more experience with life, I guess, that you start to see the beauty of the relationships, and that's where the value of your life is, and not necessarily in achieving another task or another report or whatever.
Correct.
And it's been so interesting. We've talked about so many different things, but do you just want to quickly, in the last 30 seconds, we talked before the show, and it was a wonderful example about the failing 9,999 times. I just think it was a real gem to share with people.
When we're doing training with people, we often say to people, we say, well, how many times do you have to practice something to get good at what you do? And generally they'll say 5, 10, 20, 100. Maybe you'll get the occasional person who will say 1,000. And you know, we say that generally to be good at what you do, you need to practice at least 10,000 times. And the people's eyes usually glaze over when you say 10,000 times for those areas. And the one thing two questions I always ask. One is, does that mean for 9,999 times you've been a failure? And the answer to that, of course not, because what you're doing is you're learning, changing the technique, doing things better, refining it, doing it again. So practice and practice and practice. So you go from competency to mastery. And that's part of that process that you have for it. So failure, as we say, is first attempt in learning, is very true. So from martial arts, you understand that to be able to successfully, you need to fail first as part of that process to learn as you go through it. And that's the important part of what we see with people in terms of those issues. And I think applying that to what we do within the world and what we do in relation to other people, in those 6 areas of life is very important to understand that you need to go through that first to be able to understand what success should look like and feel like as part of the process.
And that's a wonderful way to end the show today. And thank you so much, Paul. You've given so much value, and I'm sure everybody watching has been really appreciative of all the great examples and the great insights that you've shared.
Thank you very much. It's a shame it's so short because you said we could have gone on for a lot longer. But
yeah, we could talk for hours.
Yeah. Hopefully, if anyone has wishes to got some value out of it, and look forward to talking to anyone who likes to get in contact. Thank you very much, Michele, for the opportunity.
You're very welcome, and thank you to Paul, and thank you to all the different viewers out there today. It's been a real pleasure having you on the show and having so many fabulous viewers watching and hearing these incredible insights. Every week is so different, and I'm so grateful to my guests for coming and sharing their amazing insights into how you can create success in your life. But until next week, from my heart to your heart, be great, be fabulous, and be you.